Hey guys, welcome back to our magical room of guitars. And today we're going to be talking about amps. Okay, so what I'm going to be doing here is just walking you through the basic difference between the kind of valve amps and the digital amps and kind of help you decide what you want in your space. So is your space set up as a home studio practice space? Do you have room? Do you not want to disturb your neighbors? Do you not want to disturb the kids sleeping upstairs? Do you not want to disturb whoever it is, your parents? You know, it's just, we're going to be talking about the pros and the cons of having each of these. I'm going to show you through 3 different ones. And we'll have a quick listen to hear the difference in sound as well. So whenever you're ready, let's get started. Okay guys, so just before we get started with this particular lesson, don't forget you can head on over to the website to get access to our full write-up. And if you do want to support us as well as get access to our community, direct access to myself and all the other mentors, as well as progress tracking, a customized pathway and so much more, then you can sign up to our YJ Club and all the links are below. All right, so we're going to start by looking at valve amps. All right, so when I was growing up, it was all about valve amps for me because I was really into my blues players. So I was looking at Eric Clapton, I was looking at B.B. King, Freddie King, Buddy Guy, all of these kind of guys. These were my inspirations, and all of those had valve. They had Fender, to be honest, and this is something that was a really big part of my growing up. So I wanted to start here to kind of explain why this is so important to a lot of players. And then we've got a kind of basis for them moving on into the kind of more digital stuff. Now, the first thing I will say is if you're going to go down the route of a valve amp, okay, which is just an amazing thing, an amazing sound, but it is going to be louder. Okay, that's the first thing. You know, it's you know, this one especially, I think this is 30 watts, okay? So whenever you get into valve world, you're gonna start dealing with wattage and you can get 10 watt amps, 15, 20, 30, up to 100, up to more probably, but you know, as you get more wattage, the louder it typically gets, okay? So this is the kind of amp which you might use on stage, but even then, this is still very, very loud. To give you an idea, you know, you might not necessarily hit, you know, the full extent of that if I really hit it, but it's loud, and this is on less than 1. Okay, so if you think of your dial going all the way up to 12, this is on less than 1. So the first thing to consider is, do you have the space for this? If you're doing this, I would never put this in my house because I don't want to wake up the kids or annoy my wife too much. Equally, the neighbors is something to consider. However, if you've got a bit more space, maybe you've got a bigger room like this or a barn or somewhere where you're just not quite annoying people, or if you can soundproof a space, then this is a fantastic option. For my mind, there's no better sound. And this is, let's remember, this is an opinion. So this is something that will divide opinion naturally. But for me, the responsiveness, you know, when I touch it gently, I feel it. I feel it coming back from the amp. And then when I give it a bit more, you really feel that too. And actually, I'm just going to turn the reverb down a bit. But it's just, it's such a responsive sound. It's very visceral, I think is the right word, but for me it feels like I'm part of the setup. So my guitar is an extension of me and the amp is a further extension of that. I can make it sound the way I want to, and as a blues player, that's absolutely crucial to me. So the first thing I'd say is, you know, you have to play to your space, to whatever your aim is. And with a valve amp, you know, if you're starting to go over into that world of a gigging musician and you're playing in studios, or you can get somewhere where it's a kind of a soundproof or something like that, then this is a fantastic thing. You will love it. There's so many different types of valve amp out there. I'm not going to suggest one or the other. I just have always loved Fender style amps. But there's so many out there, okay? But we're talking about Valve versus digital. So that's the idea behind Valve. Now, if you are in a space where you have to be more aware of your volume levels, then we can talk about maybe a more digital option. One little caveat to that concept, guys, is that you do have an option of getting something called an attenuator. Now, this is a really cool box. This actually does a few things: a load box, an attenuator, a speaker sim, a DI. But I just want to focus on the attenuator part of this. You can get lots of different types of attenuator. I'll say it again. And basically, this kind of just reduces the volume of your amp. I'm not going to talk scientifically about it. From a point of view of a user, myself just using it, you plug this into the amp, and you basically have like a master volume. So you can kind of still get a little bit of like the sound of the Valve if it was cranked up, you know, because we all talk about the idea that you want to have a nice solid volume level with your Valve amp because you get the real sound of the Valve, the cranked sound, right? But the volume is so ridiculous that it's almost impossible to do most of the time. However, with something like this is basically a master volume. So you plug it through that, you crank up your amp, and you just turn it down on this, and then you can legitimately practice at home. So perhaps one option for you guys who are gigging, but also want something you can use at home and don't want to spend money on another amp, is get something like this, attenuator. You can use the same amp, you can gig with it without the attenuator, or even with if you want to, but at home you can still practice with it with this. So that's one other option for you when you're thinking about your home studio. All right, so let's talk about digital amps, modeling, amp modeling, I guess you'd call it. And this is probably for most of you guys who are having a home studio setup or a home practice space where you have to be quite conscious of volume, this is probably the best idea, I would say. Because essentially this models the sound of various Valve amps. Now here I've got a Boss Katana, I think it's called, and you can get so many different modeling. Over there I've got a Fender Mustang. There's just so many different ones, Line 6. These are just a few off the top of my head that I can think of. And what they do in principle is they take the sound of the Valve, the idea, but they model it digitally, okay? So it's basically the theory is that you get the sound without the side effects, without the volume, shall we say. So, you know, here, same kind of idea, with like a clean tone through a modeling amp, I get a great sound. It's a brilliant sound. It sounds amazing, and I've got so many options on this kind of amp as well. I can add digital effects. I can add delays. Like, for example, let's see. There you go. At the touch of a button, I can add delays, I can add reverbs, modulations, choruses, all these kind of things. We'll talk a bit more about pedals in the next video. But it's all in one box. I can also change between clean, like so. I can, at a flick of a switch, I can go lead. I can go brown sound, apparently. This kind of thing. It's at the flick of a switch, the volume stays consistent. It just kind of compresses more. Everything is done digitally. I'm just going to change that back to the clean for a second. You know, you can still absolutely, if you want to at some point get it loud, you can still do it. You can still use that live if you wanted to, because it still can really go. A lot of these amps have the option of even changing the wattage. You know, so this is set at 50 watts. At quite a low volume, but I can change that up to 100 watts, 0.5 watts, which just immediately brings down the overall volume level and the amount of power that comes out of the amp. So it's just supremely versatile, essentially. They're also generally a little bit cheaper than Valve amps. Well, actually quite a lot cheaper most of the time. So that's another real positive. And in terms of in your own home studio, you can even plug headphones into that. So if you really want to have a no sound situation, you know, maybe your studio setup might be in the corner of your living room, for example, with a guitar and an amp and maybe a little pedal board or something like that, then you don't want to be disturbing your wife or whoever it is sitting there watching TV. So just have that and then plug your headphones in. You have a no sound situation. All they've got to listen to then is this, just the clean sound of your strings, which is annoying enough most of the time, especially when you're just going all day long, like I do. So it's very, very versatile, and I want to stress that it still is a brilliant sound. A lot of the time when we come in here and we all just jam, we all plug in through digital amps. It's easier, and you can quickly get a sound that you like, maybe a little bit of delay, an overdriven sound. I always like to trap in through a clean sound. We can all get that at a touch of a few buttons at a reasonable volume, so we're not walking out of the room with ringing coming out of our ears. So I think for a lot of people with home studios, this is going to be a really good option for you. Now, I do also have one more option on that kind of concept, which is something like this. We're getting more and more of these kind of things come out now, which is where you literally plug into your jack socket. So let me just turn this off for a second. So if I take that out and I plug this in, this is Fender Mustang Micro, and I just literally, hang on, plug it in like that, plug my headphones into this, and I've got an amp in a box. So it's the same technology as this, basically, or the Fender technology, but it's all just in your headphones. And I don't even need a lead, I don't need an amp. If my home setup needs to be so small, but I still have something that means I'll sit down and practice, this is a great idea. And actually, this is exactly like my home setup. In my house, I have my guitar on a stand, and I've got, not these, but they're called Waza Airs, they're kind of by Boss, and it's just headphones with an amp in it, very similar to this, but you have to have your own headphones for this. And I can sit and I can play, and I can practice. I just have my phone out, I have backing tracks going through it. Fantastic, that's how I can practice. So you have to know what your space is going to be, what your limitations are, what you're aiming to get, and then you can buy things for that. So just to summarize, we've got the valve amps, we've got the digital amps like that, we've also got the option of something absolutely minuscule that you can put like that. The final amp to mention, we don't actually have one here sadly to show you, but it's a solid state amp, okay? And this is much closer to the kind of valve amp experience, just without the fiddly valves and the, with a valve amp, you've got a very heavy thing. You'll know, if you've ever picked up a valve amp, you are really picking up a chunk. You're dealing with proper valves, so they can break and you have to replace them. Now with a solid state amp, it can often be very, very similar to the sound of the valve amp, but you don't have to worry about that kind of thing. It's a lot lighter. You'll never have to replace a valve. And you can get a great sound, even at a slightly lower volume with those solid state amps, you get a really fantastic sound. So it's kind of a nice in-between, for a lot of, when we go to, for example, Yuki's studio, which we'll be going to in Unit 2 and Unit 4, you'll see that he rocks an awesome solid state amp. So when we go to that one, we'll talk more about it, we'll hear it. But until then, that is another option for you. Again, when you're making your decision, what's your aim? What are you trying to get together? What's your space like? And then you can decide which one of these amps might work best for you. So there we go, guys. I hope that helps, and I'll see you for the next lesson. Okay, guys, that's it for this lesson. If you're looking for the next lesson, please do click here. If you're looking to start the whole series, then we've got the full playlist available right here. You can go from start to finish.